Fade in, the wind howls softly across a barren, snow-covered expanse. The landscape is endless, white, frozen, silent, and somewhere within it, footsteps vanish into the void. In the winter of 1959, 9 young Soviet hikers set out on what was meant to be an exhilarating adventure. Their goal? To conquer the icy peaks of the Ural Mountains in one of the most remote and unforgiving regions of the Soviet Union, an area ominously named by the local Mansi people as Kalat-Syakhl, or Mountain of the Dead. The group was led by 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, a respected and highly disciplined engineering student from the Ural Polytechnic Institute. Dyatlov was admired for his calm leadership, his technical prowess, and his unshakable confidence in the wild. He was no stranger to the bitter cold or to the challenges of Siberian expeditions. His companions were much like him, intelligent, athletic, and idealistic. Most were fellow students, bonded by their passion for exploration and their status as elite hikers, each with experience in treks classified as Category II difficulty. This journey, however, would elevate them to the most prestigious rank of all, Category III, the highest and most dangerous level in Soviet hiking. There was Zinaida Kolmogorova, known for her warmth and resilience. Rustam Slobodin, the philosophical thinker who could hike for miles in silence. Lyudmila Dubinina, who, despite a previous injury on an earlier trek, had insisted on joining this one. Yuri Krivonishenko, the group's joker and morale booster. Alexander Kolvatov, meticulous and quiet. Nikolai Thiboks-Brignol, tall, strong, and unshakably optimistic. And Semyon Zolotaryov, a World War II veteran and the oldest of the group, a last-minute addition who remained somewhat mysterious to the others. Yuri Yudin, the 10th member, was the only one who would return alive, not by choice but by fate. Afflicted with sciatica and other health issues, he turned back early in the journey. He bid his friends farewell at the last settlement on their path, Vizhay, unaware that he would never see them again. The expedition began on January 27, 1959. Spirits were high. Their backpacks were full, their boots tightly laced. The snow crunched beneath their feet as they marched into the wilderness, their laughter echoing faintly against the icy trees. They documented the early part of their journey with cameras and journals, preserving smiles and shared jokes as they huddled in tents and cooked meals over portable stoves. To them, it was more than a trek. It was an assertion of youthful strength in a country defined by order and control. The Soviet Union prized stoic endurance and bravery, and these young adventurers embodied both. They were the kind of citizens the state proudly held up as examples of Soviet youth, educated, disciplined, and fearless. But the weather was turning. As they ascended higher, the sky grew heavy with snow. Winds picked up, biting through their clothing with increasing ferocity. The trail became obscured, forcing the group to slow down and reassess their route. According to the recovered diaries, they made a navigational decision that would seal their fate. Instead of following the planned path through the pass, they veered west, perhaps unintentionally, onto the slope of Kalat-Syakhl. There, on that bleak, open mountainside, they set up camp on the evening of February 1st. Why they chose such an exposed, perilous location remains a question that fuels endless speculation. Some believe Dyatlov didn't want to lose altitude. Others suggest they were simply disoriented by the storm. Whatever the reason, they dug into the snow, pitched their tent, and settled in for the night. That would be their final shelter. In the darkness of the mountain, surrounded by bitter cold and snowdrifts, something would happen. Something so terrifying and chaotic that it would send the entire group fleeing half-dressed into the sub-zero wilderness, barefoot, bleeding, disoriented. Something so inexplicable that decades later the world would still be asking, what happened to the Dyatlov group? But for now they were alive, laughing, journaling, singing songs, still unaware of the storm not just in the sky but one that history itself would never forget. As the wind begins to rise and snow obscures the horizon, the shadows of 9 figures vanish into the white. The flicker of a camera shutter, a frozen smile caught in time, snowflakes resting on fur-lined hoods, footsteps pressed into powdery white, slowly disappearing beneath fresh snow. In the days following their departure from Vizhay, the Dyatlov group pressed deeper into the wilderness, their bodies moving in rhythm with the cold wind and falling snow. Their route traced along the Lozva River and toward the mountains that loomed like sleeping giants ahead. Diaries and photographs recovered from their belongings later helped piece together their final known days, silent fragments of what would soon become a national mystery. They were meticulous in documenting their journey. Every detail was recorded, whether conditions, food rations, group dynamics, even the jokes they told to keep spirits high. These entries revealed not just the progression of their trek, but the evolving mood of the hikers as they battled worsening conditions. January 28th, a turning point. Ural, plagued by joint pain and fatigue, was forced to turn back. It was a painful decision for him. He had longed for the sense of accomplishment this expedition promised. He took a final photograph with the group, shared hugs, and watched them disappear into the trees. As he later recalled, it was as if some unseen force stopped him that day, as if fate had spared him from the unknown. The remaining 9 pushed onward, trudging through a growing sea of snow. Temperatures had dropped below degrees C. Visibility declined, but morale remained surprisingly high. The diaries described songs being sung, debates around the campfire, and a group that, despite the hardship, remained unified. On January 31st, they arrived at the edge of a highland area, preparing to ascend Siakal the next day. Here, they stashed supplies in a makeshift cache beneath the snow, extra food, equipment, anything they wouldn't need on the final ascent. It was a smart move intended for the return journey. February 1st, the last known day. The hikers began their climb toward the pass. The weather turned grim, strong winds, thick snow, and poor visibility forced them to move slowly. The slope was steep and unwelcoming. Somewhere along the way, they veered off course, possibly due to whiteout conditions. Instead of circling around the mountain toward their intended path, they ended up on the eastern slope of Siakal. There, in the biting cold and exposed to the elements, they made a strange decision. They set up camp directly on the side of the mountain. Why, they were experienced hikers. They would have known the dangers of such exposure. Sheltering in the nearby forest, less than 2 kilometers downhill, would have provided natural protection. So why here? Why now? Some theorize it was a tactical choice. Dyatlov didn't want to lose elevation. Others believe they were simply too exhausted to continue. Perhaps the group wanted to test their endurance, or maybe they were unaware of just how close the forest edge was through the snow and fog. That night the tent was pitched. The group settled in for the evening, cooking dinner and continuing their journaling. The last photographs show them smiling, tired but content. There's a sense of camaraderie in those images, a feeling of shared accomplishment, of nearing the end of something difficult. Then nothing. No more journal entries, no more photos. The world outside the tent was a howling abyss of snow and darkness, and at some point in those early morning hours, the tranquility of the camp would shatter, inexplicably, violently. What happened between the last scribbled word in a notebook and the moment they fled their tent in utter terror has haunted researchers, historians, and families for over 6 decades. Their communications ceased. Days passed. The planned telegram to their sports club in Sverdlovsk never arrived. No one panicked at first. Delays in the wilderness were common, but as the days turned into a week, worry settled in. The families grew anxious. The institute waited. Still no word. By February 20th, the silence could no longer be ignored. A search party was assembled. At first, it was composed of students and volunteers. Soon after, the military joined the effort. Planes and helicopters scanned the white landscape. Foot soldiers and ski teams trudged through snowdrifts, calling out names that would never be answered. Then, on February 26th, the mystery took its first breath. A torn tent was found on the slopes of Siakal, half buried in snow, collapsed, and eerily silent. When rescuers approached it, they immediately noticed something strange. The tent had been cut open from the inside, and the trail that followed was nothing short of terrifying. Footsteps led away from the tent, barefoot, chaotic, vanishing into the forest below. The snow was thick, swallowing sound and sense. Searchers moved cautiously, their breath rising in clouds of frost, eyes scanning the endless white for any sign of life or death. On February 26, 1959, nearly a month after the Dyatlov group was expected to return, the first breakthrough came. A volunteer searcher spotted something buried in the snow, an unnatural shape jutting out from the landscape. As they drew closer, they uncovered the Dyatlov group's tent. But what they saw made no sense. The tent, partially collapsed and covered in snow, had been slashed open, not from the outside, but from within. Whatever had driven the hikers out into the brutal cold had terrified them enough to tear through the canvas in panic, bypassing the entrance. Some of their belongings remained neatly arranged inside: boots, jackets, cold weather gear, vital items that no experienced hiker would abandon, unless something had gone terribly wrong. Investigators followed the trail of footprints leading away from the tent. Strangely, they were not running but walking, as if in a trance. The prints led downhill toward a dense forest nearly 1.5 kilometers away. Then, at the edge of the forest, the first bodies were found. Yuri Krivonishenko and Georgy Doroshenko lay beneath a cedar tree, stripped to their underwear, huddled close to what appeared to have been a fire. Their hands were burned, possibly from desperately trying to keep the flames alive. The tree above them had broken branches, clues suggesting someone had climbed it, either to spot the tent or escape an unknown threat. Nearby, the remains of Dyatlov, Kolmogorova, and Slobodin were found, spaced out between the cedar tree and the original tent. They seemed to have died trying to crawl back. Their bodies were poorly clothed, some barefoot. Slobodin had a fractured skull. All three showed signs of hypothermia, but their deaths did not explain everything. For days, the rest of the group remained missing. Then in May, as the snow began to melt, searchers discovered a ravine deeper in the forest. It was there that the final 4 bodies were found: Dubinina, Thibox-Brignol, Kolvatov, and Zolotaryov, buried under 4 meters of snow. These corpses painted a far more disturbing picture. Dubinina's tongue was missing, so were her eyes. Her ribs had been crushed as if by immense pressure. Thibox-Brignol had suffered a fatal skull injury. Zolotaryov's chest was caved in, also with the kind of force comparable to a car crash, but with no external injuries to match. There were traces of radiation on some of their clothing. Whatever killed these hikers had not been an avalanche. It had been sudden, violent, and to this day remains unexplained. They had set out to conquer nature. Instead, nature, or something within it, had conquered them. Forensic analysis only deepened the mystery. The injuries suffered by Dubinina and Zolotaryov were so severe that experts stated they could not have been caused by a human being, not by a fall, not even by a wild animal. There were no signs of struggle between the hikers, no wounds indicating a fight. Whatever happened, it was sudden and overwhelming, enough to shatter ribs, crush skulls, and send seasoned hikers fleeing half-naked into deadly temperatures. Even more disturbing were the inconsistencies. Dubinina's tongue had been removed, but there was no evidence of predation, no blood in her stomach, and no other injuries from scavengers. Her body had been carefully positioned, almost ritualistically. Her eyes, too, were missing. These weren't mere effects of decomposition. Something had happened to her after death, something chilling. Then came the radiation. Traces of radioactive material were found on the clothing of 2 hikers. The levels were abnormal, raising eyebrows among scientists and investigators alike. Where had the radiation come from? None of the hikers worked in radioactive environments, nor had they carried such materials. Another hiker had facial injuries so severe that his skull was described as fractured with precision. No bruising, no external bleeding, just a collapsed bone structure, as though his head had been compressed by an invisible force. The Soviet government seemed eager to close the case. The official cause of death, a vague phrase, a compelling natural force. What that force was remained undefined. But rumors had begun to swirl. Whispers of military experiments, of top-secret weapons testing, of escaped prisoners from nearby labor camps, or something more unnatural. The Dyatlov Pass incident became more than a tragedy. It became a myth, a puzzle without a key. In the absence of answers, speculation took root. Avalanche. It was the most convenient explanation. Perhaps a slab of snow collapsed onto their tent, prompting them to flee. But avalanche experts rejected this. There was no debris consistent with a snow slide, and the injuries didn't match typical avalanche trauma. The tent was still partially standing. Military involvement. Some believed the hikers had unknowingly wandered into a weapons test, perhaps parachute mines, which could explain the internal injuries without external damage. Others speculated about secret experiments involving infrasound, a frequency of sound waves known to cause nausea, panic, and hallucinations. Could that explain the sudden terror? UFOs. Yes, this theory gained traction after testimonies from locals who reported strange lights in the sky that night. Bright orbs, silent flashes, Soviet records even contained mentions of unexplained aerial phenomena in the region. Was the group a victim of something from beyond? The Mansi people. Some questioned whether indigenous tribes had attacked the hikers, but the Mansi were peaceful and there were no signs of a struggle. In fact, the Mansi were the ones who helped guide search parties into the mountains. Paranormal forces. From Yetis to interdimensional portals, the stranger theories abounded. Most were quickly dismissed, but one thing was clear: none of the standard explanations fit all the facts. The incident refused to conform to logic. And so the Dyatlov Pass became a mystery carved in ice, unsolved, unyielding, unforgotten. The truth was buried beneath snow and secrecy. From the start, there were signs that something was being hidden. The case files were marked classified. Investigators were pressured to wrap up the inquiry. Witness testimonies were altered. Key evidence disappeared. The autopsy photos were grainy, partial, and in some cases missing. Soviet officials gave vague press releases offering minimal details. The families, desperate for answers, were stonewalled. Some received closed caskets. Others were told to stay silent. And then nothing. The incident faded into obscurity. The Soviet machine turned its attention elsewhere, and the mountains swallowed the truth. It would take decades before the files were declassified. When they were, they sparked a renewed frenzy. Journalists, scientists, even adventure tourists made pilgrimages to the site, trying to uncover what the government had once so carefully concealed. But the more they searched, the stranger the story became. The wind still howls through Dyatlov Pass, but it carries more than snow, it carries questions. Over the years, the Dyatlov mystery grew into legend. Documentaries, books, theories on forums, expeditions retracing the path. Even the Russian government reopened the case in 2019. Their conclusion: an avalanche again. But the public wasn't convinced. Modern forensic experts and physicists, using 3D modeling and trauma simulation, have suggested hybrid theories. Some believe a rare snow phenomenon caused the panic. Others point to a combination of events: environmental stress, group psychology, and possibly classified tests gone wrong. Still, key questions remain. Why was the tent cut from the inside? Why did the group flee in such a calm, linear pattern, only to die brutally moments later? What caused such bizarre injuries? And why did the government go to such lengths to suppress what should have been a simple accident? Even after 65 years, the case remains open in the minds of many. The Dyatlov group has become a symbol, not just of unexplained death, but of the human need to understand the unknowable. The snow falls quietly now. The footsteps are gone, but the silence is louder than ever. Imagine them that night. The wind wails against the thin fabric of their tent. A sound, a vibration, an unknown presence. Something pulls them from sleep, and fear grips their hearts. Not confusion, terror. They cut their way out of the tent, running barefoot into sub-zero cold. They split up. Some try to climb trees, others attempt to return. A few make it farther, but succumb to their injuries in that frozen ravine. What did they see? What did they feel? We may never know. Their bodies were found, their story was told, but the truth remains hidden beneath layers of ice, lies, and time. The Dyatlov Pass incident is more than just a mystery. It is a wound in the fabric of history. A reminder that even in an age of science and reason, there are still places in the world where nature, or something else, refuses to be explained. And in the snowy silence of the Ural Mountains, the final question echoes still. What happened on that mountain?